เรียนรู้คำสั่งคอมมานด์ไลน์ใน Linux ใน Linux เป็น Open Source นะครับเป็น Open Source ของคอมพิวเตอร์ของก็มีพวก Ubuntu Debian แล้วก็ CentOS หรืออะไรหลายอย่างถ้าใครจะอยากเรียนรู้ทำเซิร์ฟเวอร์ก็ต้องเรียนรู้คอมมานด์ไลน์ก่อนเดี๋ยววันนี้เราจะมาเรียนรู้ระหว่างเราล้างครัวกันนะครับเราจะหันไประหว่างเราล้างครัวเนาะหันไปตั้งกล้องก่อนเราจะล้างครัวกันวันนี้ล้างครัวไปเรียนรู้ Linux ไปนะครับ
This is just for users who already have Ubuntu. Here's the terminal app, you just search for it and we'll run our commands there. Now, if you are a Mac user, remember it's part of this Unix family, Unix-like operating systems. All the commands I'm going to show you will work on the Mac. All you need to do is search for terminal, and it will probably look a bit different than this, but you will have a terminal where you can run the same commands I show you. So over here on Ubuntu, when I show the psaxww command, it works. You don't need to run this, by the way. But over here on my Mac, same thing, psaxww. It also works, and we'll actually learn what this is, but it gives me a bunch of stuff. Alright, Windows users, it's your turn. Let's talk about installation and the steps you need to go through in order to run Linux. So remember, the problem here is that on Windows, we just don't have access to the same commands. They're implemented differently. Windows is not part of this Unix family, this Unix-like family of operating systems. So this means that a lot of the commands you'll learn in this video and that developers use every single day are not going to work on Windows, or they'll work differently, or they'll partially work. Now, Windows has its own set of commands, and you could live in that world exclusively. It's just a different world. So if you want to use a lot of the common developer tools, and you're watching this video, you probably already know what you want to do, we need to get some way of running Linux commands on Windows. The way that we do this is really two options. There used to only be one. We used to have a virtual machine. It's a pain to install. It's totally isolated from your actual Windows operating system, and it can be slow, can have a lot of overhead. Now, instead, we have a really cool fancy option called WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux. This is actually put out by Microsoft, and it allows us to run a Linux environment directly on Windows, or inside of Windows. So it's not isolated, it's not a virtual machine. It actually works directly inside of Windows. It's just a command line version of Linux, to be clear. So we're not going to have a separate desktop. You're not going to have all the apps and stuff that I have on Ubuntu. But that's kind of the point. You can still be a Windows user and have Linux commands from the command line. So it's really, really cool. It's updated pretty frequently. It's still under active development. And the really good news is that it's a lot easier to install these days than it used to be. You do need to make sure you have Windows 10 version 2004 with build number 19041 or higher, or Windows 11 in order to use the simplified installation instructions. Otherwise, you can follow. I would recommend going to this webpage anyway, docs.microsoft.com, look for WSL, because this does change. But if you have an older version, you can still install WSL, you just have different instructions. But if you have the appropriate build number or higher, all we need to do is from the app called PowerShell, which I have open right now, you can just search PowerShell. Okay, this opens up this terminal where you can see PS, by the way, I'm using PowerShell. I can type commands in here and it tells me, in that case, I don't know what the heck you're talking about, but the command we want to run is WSL-install. So let's try it, WSL-install. The requested operation requires elevation. So what this is telling me is that I need to have admin privileges or permissions to do that. So why is that happening? Well, I need to run PowerShell as an administrator. So I'm going to search again for PowerShell, but I'm going to click on Run as Administrator here. Alright, and that opens me up a new window. It says Administrator, Windows PowerShell, and we try again. WSL-install. Whoops. And it might take a little while, so I'll be back, and hopefully this finishes successfully. And if not, I guess you'll watch me debug it. Oh, check it out. Already we can see it's downloading Ubuntu. So that's the default Linux distribution it uses. When I first installed WSL a year or two ago for a different course, you actually had to go and download your Linux distribution separately. You had to go download WSL separately. You had to then connect the two and point it to the particular installation, and it was just a huge pain. But now, hopefully, super easy. Take a look. It says the requested operation is successful. That's always good. Changes won't be effective until the system is rebooted. So let's reboot.
Salesforce is the backbone of many organizations, helping connect your people to your customers in real time. But to realize the full power of Salesforce, companies need to make sure apps, integrations, and workflows function as expected, keeping up with Salesforce releases and manage customizations and configurations, all while ensuring the platform performs with speed and at scale. This is no easy feat. Until now, no other testing solution was able to handle the complexity of Salesforce and be used by everyone.
Okay, so once that finishes up, I restarted. I now have, actually when I restarted, it automatically opened up Ubuntu, which is now installed. It wasn't even a thing before. Now I have an app I can run called Ubuntu. It opens up right now, at least this terminal that I can see here, and it tells me, I had to install for a few minutes. And then it wants me to set up a default user account. And this username that I set up does not have to match my Windows username, but whatever you do, you want to remember what you put in here. So this is going to be for our Ubuntu part of this machine. I'm going to make my username Colt, and then a password. And you'll want to remember that password. You're not going to see what you're typing, but I'll hit enter and then retype it again. You can change that password later. I'll actually show you a command you can use to change that password. And there we are. I now have Linux. I'm running Ubuntu on my Windows machine. So the commands will learn things like pwd and who am I, just to show a couple simple ones, or psaxww. There are lots and lots of commands we're going to cover, and they now will work. These commands are running on Windows. Now, there is some additional setup you can go through. If you go to the installation documentation, they recommend on Windows that you, whoops, this is the wrong page here. They recommend that after you set up your Linux user info, which we just did, that you can also install an app called Windows Terminal. And Windows Terminal is, remember, Terminal is just an application that can run different shells, and it can sort of be a jack of all trades. We can use Windows Terminal as our terminal. It's just a more sort of fancy, better features, more customizable terminal application. So you do not need to do this. But if you want to, you can install the Windows Terminal app, and you can make it look all nice and pretty and run Ubuntu from inside Windows Terminal, rather than the default terminal that comes with Ubuntu. So one more time, perfectly serviceable just to use this terminal. But if you want to get Windows Terminal, if you're serious about, mastering all this stuff and working as a developer or some other, you want to use Terminal day in and day out, Windows Terminal is just the better option. It has more features. So I'm going to install it. I'm going to download it just from Windows website or Microsoft's website. And now that it's finished, I'll click Launch. And remember, Terminal is just like a piece of software that can connect or interact with different shells. So right now it opened up with PowerShell, which is not what we want to use in this course. First of all, let's see if I can just make this larger font for you. There we go. Okay, it's a little bit larger now. So as you can see, it's using PowerShell. But I can click this little drop-down arrow here and switch over to instead use Ubuntu. So now I'm in Ubuntu. You can see my prompt changes here. It has my username in there. You can customize the appearance and all of that. So if we go to settings, you can go down to Ubuntu. You can set up different appearance, font size. But what you can also do is set the default profile to be Ubuntu. And if we save that, it now means when I make a new window, if I just do plus, It is Ubuntu. You can see my little Linux penguin. That's the logo there. And we're now up and running with Windows Terminal. There's a lot you can do to customize it, but that's not really the point of this course. So now you have it. Run your commands here. When you see me run them in Ubuntu, run them here. Okie dokie, that should hopefully wrap up installation. Whether you are actually running Linux like I am right now, Ubuntu, this is the desktop version. I have the terminal open. I will be running my commands right here. But if you're not, maybe you're using a Mac. So here's my Mac. I've got my terminal open right here. I'll run commands inside the terminal application here. They'll work just the same. And then finally, if you're on Windows, hopefully you installed WSL. So here we are. I'm running, this is Windows Terminal. Make sure I'm running Ubuntu here. I run my commands right here. So whichever one you're on, just make sure you know where you're going to be running those commands. If you're on Windows, make sure it's not PowerShell, because you'll run into problems. We want to make sure we are running Ubuntu so that our Unix commands will work. Otherwise, they won't. Yes, by the way, all three of these are on one computer right now. Got Linux, Windows, and my Mac. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so now that we hopefully have everything installed correctly, we can go ahead and get started. Now, before we do, the first thing I just want to make clear is that for the most part, there's no order to the commands in this video. It's a bunch of commands and they're useful, and most of them don't really have to do with one another or depend on each other. But early on, right now, I'm going to go through some of the very basic commands, and there is a logical order to how I'm going to teach them. All of that is to say, if you're a complete beginner, stay right here, and we'll go through the basics in order. But if you have experience, if you know the basics of ls and man and cd and pwd, you may want to skip ahead. So check out the timestamps in the description below, and click on whatever command looks interesting or you'd like to learn more about. But if you are new, stick with me. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so before we talk about commands, let's talk about not commands. In my prompt, if I start typing really anything and I hit enter, the shell is going to try and process that and figure out what command I'm referring to. But I'm not referring to any valid command, so I get a message that says command not found. Same thing on a Mac. Type gibberish, we get command not found. Same thing over here on my Windows machine, although I'm running Linux on Windows, and I get command not found. Okay, hopefully not that surprising. So what we want to do is type commands that actually make sense, that the computer can figure out what we're referring to, and then run some corresponding program for us. And the first really simple one I'm going to show you is maybe not that useful, but it's just a good demonstration of a simple command. It is who am I? All one word, no spaces, who am I? All lowercase, it's going to print the username of the currently logged in user. So maybe not something you need to do all the time. You probably know who you're logged in as, though there are uses for this, especially in scripting, if you write scripts later on. But anyway, if I just run it here, who am I? Over here on my Ubuntu installation, I am logged in as Colt. That is the username I have. Here's my Mac. To run who am I? My username is slightly different. It's my full name, Colt Steele, and I think on Windows it's just Colt as well. Alright, so that's our first official command. Really, really simple, hopefully. Nice and straightforward, right? There's a difference between just typing gibberish and typing a command that is recognized. But it is important to note, who am I, like this, is not the same thing at all. There's no real autocomplete or spell check or anything like that. The terminal is just going to take what you give it and try and find that program. So it can't find this program. Who am? It only knows who am I. Okay, so the next command we'll look at is called man. The man command, M-A-N, is short for manual. And that's exactly what it is. It is a command that it doesn't do anything to our system. It's purely informative. It tells us information or manual pages for commands, as well as some other things, not just commands, but we're going to focus on the command side of things. So anytime we have some new command, like we just learned, who am I, we can actually run man followed by that command name to get a manual page entry for that command. So if we need to learn more about who am I or any other command, most likely you won't need to learn more about who am I because it's so simple, but we can do just that. We can run man followed by a command like who am I. Hit enter. And our screen changes pretty drastically. That prompt goes away. I can't type commands anymore. What we see here is a man page. It tells us the name of the command, prints the effective user ID. Something called a synopsis. We'll come back to this when we learn some other commands. And then a description. Print the username associated with the current effective user ID. Pretty straightforward. There's not a whole lot here. We can see who wrote the command, and we can find a place to report bugs. This is a very simple man page. Some commands have very long pages, dozens and dozens of pages you would actually need to scroll through. Now, important to note, first of all, to get out of here, we need to type the letter Q. If you forget that, you can find it down here. But remember, I am not at my prompt right now. I can't type commands. So I can't type, who am I? If I type things, I start to see a whole bunch of other text appear. I'm actually looking at some help that tells me more about how this program works. So it tells me, you can exit by typing Q, or uppercase Q, or ZZ. You can type H to display the help page that I'm looking at right now. So that's what happened. I typed who am I, hit H. But anyway, I'm going to type Q to get out of there. Now I'm back to the man page for who am I, and I'll type Q again. So just one more time. If I type man, followed by some command, if I want to get out of here, type Q. And now I can type commands again. So if I try and run man on its own, it's going to tell me what manual page do you want. This is a manual command. I need to know what you want a manual for. So we can actually do man. And that gives us the man page for the man command. It's an interface to the system reference manuals. There's a bunch here. One thing I'll just point out quickly is that we can scroll by using the mouse. That is one option. But it's a lot easier to scroll one page at a time by hitting space. There's a lot of text here, and I can scroll down by hitting space rather than having to. I can also use the arrow keys, by the way, to go one line at a time, up and down, which is what I'm doing right now. Space to go down a page at a time. Q to get out of here. All right. So that's the man command. Nice and simple, hopefully. Very useful, especially when we have more complicated commands. The next command is also nice and straightforward. It is called clear. C-L-E-A-R. And this command will clear your terminal screen. It is useful, although I'll also show you a shortcut that you can use in place that's actually much shorter. So C-L-E-A-R will clear the mess on your screen if you have a bunch of stuff here, like I do. C-L-E-A-R, enter, and it's gone. So I'll just show another example of that over here. This is on my Mac. Let's do some more commands. How about man clear? Let's just take a look at that. Here is the manual page for the clear command. It clears the terminal screen. So I'm going to hit Q to get out of here. So I have a bunch more stuff. Let's just pretend that's all valid commands. I want to get rid of it. Clear. All right, nice and easy. Now, let's take a look again at the man page for clear. This is on Ubuntu. And I want to talk about this right here, the synopsis. So we see the name, it's clear. Here's a little description. It clears the terminal screen, nice and easy. Now, the synopsis is actually showing us the syntax, the accepted options and values we can pass to the clear command. So clear is a command that accepts an option. We can see, if you see anything in square brackets here, it means it's optional. So you can pass this in, you can pass this, uppercase V, lowercase x. Now what does that mean? Well, commands accept options that alter their behavior. You can change how a command functions. So if we scroll further down, we can see under options a description of what these different options do. Now, the one I want to talk about is -x. Now, I don't use this frequently, but it's just a good intro to options here. It says that it does not attempt to clear the terminal's scrollback buffer. Using the extended E3 capability, I have no idea what that part means. But what this means overall is that when we clear with the -x option, it is not going to clear our scroll history. So I'm going to get out of here and demonstrate this. So I'm going to hit Q, and let's make some history in here. Hello there, I love you. Okay, none of those are valid commands. I can scroll back and see those commands, and if I type regular clear, it's gone. I can't scroll back. That history is gone. Now if I recreate some of that, hello there, I love you a lot. If I use clear, but this time I provide -x, and that's our first example of an option. There will be tons of commands we see that accept options, and they can drastically change the behavior of a command. I'm going to hit enter, and it clears, but I can scroll. So I don't use that often, honestly. I'm not showing it to you because it's something you need to know. I'm showing it to you because it's an intro to options. Now, one more thing, I mentioned there's a shortcut, and I don't really type the clear command anyway. The shortcut is Control L. So if I have a bunch of stuff again, I want to get rid of it, Control L, and it's gone. So that's definitely easier than typing clear. It also works over here on my Mac, works on WSL, just Control L. Okay, so that's a clear command, nice and easy. The next command is also nice and easy. It is pwd. It stands for Print Working Directory. And this is a command that just tells us our current location in a given terminal window. So let's start with man, pwd, and it tells us pwd prints the name of your current/working directory. So just like when we have, I'll open up my file explorer here with my graphical user interface using my mouse, I have a current directory that I'm inside of. I'm viewing right now my desktop, as you can see it selected there, or I can view documents, or I can view my home folder. This would be my current working directory, home, in this window right here. But in a terminal, it's a little bit different. Let me get out of this man page here, hit Q. If I type pwd, it tells me in text where my location is. So in this window, I am on the desktop, which is located in the cult folder inside of /home. Over here, this is a different terminal window. It has a different location. Just like I can have multiple file picker windows. Here's another one. This one's in my home directory and this one's in desktop. Same idea. So I can have, in this case, pwd, a terminal window that is in /home/cult/bin. And here's one more different window, a much longer path. This is the full path to get to my location. Now, I haven't shown you how to move, so you probably don't have something like this set up with these different windows. By default, you can actually configure the default location of a new terminal window. For me, when I make a new terminal window, just click that button there. You can also use a shortcut. It defaults to the desktop, at least on Ubuntu. Over here on my Mac, when I make a new window, it defaults to what is called my home directory, /users/my username. You can configure all of this, but it doesn't really matter where you are at the moment. All that matters is that you can find it by typing pwd. All right, so the next command we're going to cover is called ls. The ls command is short for list, and we use it to do just that. It will list the contents of a folder, so we can see what is inside of a directory. Normally, if you're using a graphical user interface, you don't need a command, you just can see the contents of a folder. But in a terminal window, that is not how things work at all. We have to ask for a list of the contents. So here I'm on my desktop. As we can see, I ran pwd, it says /desktop. You can also see my prompt is displaying desktop there as well. That is also something you can configure. By default though, on Ubuntu, it does show you your current location. Anyway, if I actually look at my desktop, I can see a bunch of stuff there, and I can list it out using the ls command. So if I run ls with nothing else, just ls, it's going to list the contents of whatever current directory I'm inside of. In this window, it's the desktop. And here we go. We get a bunch of text. So we see things like, my folders. Some of them are quite odd here. I've got wildlife. I've got files like greatgatsby.txt. So there's some different colors, and folders for me are bolded. Files are not bolded, and they're just showing up white. But that's all configurable as well. But this is showing me all the contents of my desktop. If I try somewhere else, here I'm in this /bin directory. I'll type ls. I see different contents. Here, that's my desktop. All right, well, let's try it on my Mac here. This is my home directory. I see a bunch of other stuff, right? This is different. I see folders for my courses I make, my desktop, my documents, labs, some random things that I need to get rid of, like hello.js and orange.python. Those are my files and folders. Now, we also can provide a folder that we want to look inside of. We can provide a path to ls. So instead of just looking at our current location, I could peek somewhere else. So for example, right here, let's see, I'm on my desktop, and we saw that there is a wildlife folder on my desktop. I could ask, what is inside of there? By running ls wildlife, and I can tab complete, so I don't have to type the whole thing. and hit enter. And I have no idea why I have a wildlife folder that contains 3 text files called Angela, Juan, and Nico survey. Doesn't sound like wildlife to me, but okay. I've got a meal diary folder. Let's take a look in there. And it has nested folders inside. So now we can even burrow further in if we wanted to. From my current location on the desktop, I could look inside of meal diary and look inside of Friday by doing this. ls meal diary / fry, and I'm using tab complete. So I'm giving it a path that is beyond, it's not just one folder name, it's now 2 that I want it to peek inside of. So peek inside of this. And we have breakfast, dinner, and lunch. So I can actually run this again and let's see what's inside of breakfast. I don't know if there's anything in there. I'm going to recall the previous line by hitting the up arrow and then just add a B and hit tab. Yeah, there's nothing in there. Oh, it's a bit of a letdown. So that's one example of using ls, where we provide a file, or rather a folder path, but we can provide a full, what's called an absolute path, to any location on our machine. So this file, breakfast, or this folder, is inside of Friday, is inside of meal diary, which is nested in the desktop, which is where I currently am, right? PWD, I'm on the desktop. But maybe I want to see what's inside of my documents folder, and documents is not on my desktop. Well, one option is to do this, ls, and then the full path to my documents, which is /home /cult / I think it's uppercase, documents. So I'm using tab completion again, so I don't type that myself. I don't know if there's much in there. Nope, just a single file, but we can see kenneth.txt. Now, I could get there, right, by just opening the file picker, go to documents. Yes, I see it. But there are some special things that we can do with the ls command in the terminal as well. But just to recap what I showed there, we can provide what's called a relative path. So relative to our current location, I could just say, show me, list the contents of meal diary. But that only works if I'm on the desktop. If I'm somewhere else, I can't just reference meal diary. I need to reference the full path. And that's exactly what I did down here to get to documents. The documents folder is not in my desktop, so I can't do ls documents. It's going to tell me I don't know what you're talking about, that doesn't exist here on the desktop. But if I provide the full path, this is the unique location, the absolute location of documents. I can see, it's not exciting, but I can see there's one file. Alright, so now let's talk about some of the options ls accepts. So let's use that clear command or use Control L. And then let's run man ls. It tells us it does list directory contents. And then it says that there's a bunch of different options. And I'm going to scroll through them. These are all the options. A lot of them. Most of them I don't use. That doesn't mean they're not useful. There's a lot. I want to highlight 2 that are very useful. The first one is -L. So let's find it here. -L, come on. HIJKL. Doesn't tell us much, but it says it will use a long listing format. So this means I can take a look around with ls, and rather than just getting the file or folder name, I can instead add -L and get a whole bunch of other information. So there's a lot we're not going to go over here, but there's file permissions, there's the owner of the file, there's the group owner, there's file size information, modification date, the file name, so a lot of stuff here for each individual file. So that is -L. Now another thing we'll take a look at, another option, I'm going to go back to man ls, is -A. Now -A, you can also do the longer form --all. All it says is that it does not ignore entries starting with a dot. When I just type ls, I don't see any files or folders that start with a dot. ls-a, I now see quite a few. .bash, a bunch of stuff. .profile, .less something, .sudo something. There's probably some different ones on your machine. I'll just try another example here, ls-a. On my Mac, lots and lots of files that start with dot. They don't show up if I do a regular ls, which you can see right there. Nothing starts with a dot. Now we can combine options as well. So if I want to, clear the screen, I can do ls-a to see all files, including ones that are hidden, -L, I want the long format. That is one way of doing it, but the much shorter and more common way is actually just using a single dash and put your options together. So -AL or -LA. I see the long format, all the information for regular files and files and folders that start with a dot. So we're getting taking effect at the same time. So that's an intro to the ls command. So we've seen how to find our current working directory, where we are, and list the contents of that directory. Now, how do we move around? How do we do the equivalent of what I'm doing right here in the File Explorer, double-clicking on, the desktop and then going into this folder, or going back? How do I move around like I am right here? Well, in the terminal, the way that we do that is by using the cd command. CD is short for change directory. Now, the first thing you'll notice, if you try and read the man page for CD, it does not exist. It just isn't there. When I tried on my Mac, I see something, but it is not a man page for CD. If we look up here, it's a man page for a bunch of commands, tons and tons of commands, including CD. Well, what's going on here is that the cd command is actually implemented by the shell. We don't need to dive into the specifics really at all. Just I want you to know that you're not going to find a super helpful man page for cd. It's one of the few commands that we'll cover. However, you can run help. It's a different command. It's like the shell's version of man, help space cd. And it's kind of annoying. It just prints out text. You don't enter that program where you can scroll nicely. It just takes up a whole bunch of text, but it does tell us it changes the shell working directory. Change the current directory. There are some options. We're not really going to use those, however. Let's just see how it works. So I'm going to clear my screen first of all. Remind you where I am. In this window, I am in my home/cult folder. If I type ls, I see a bunch of other folders. So let's say I want to move into one of those folders. How about my desktop? Well, the way that I do that is by writing cd and then specifying that path. So I'm just going to do de tab. Hit enter, and you'll see my prompt changes. If I type pwd, you can see my location has changed to be home/cult/desktop. Before, it was just home/cult. So I just double-clicked into that folder, but I didn't click anything. It was all done via the terminal. On the desktop now. Let's go into the meal diary folder, cd into meal diary. All right, and we're now in here. I can cd into about Friday. Type ls or pwd. You can see I'm now at this pretty long path. If I type ls, let's cd into breakfast. So that's a really common thing, ls and then immediately after cd. You use ls to look around and then cd to change directories into something that you just found. So now I'm in this folder breakfast and I've hit a dead end. There's no more folders to cd into. How would I back out? Right? Normally, if I did the exact same thing, so on my desktop with the graphical user interface, it was meal diary, is that right? If I can find that, I double click, Friday, breakfast. Okay, how do I go somewhere else? Well, I have a bunch of options. I can hit the back button, I can use these buttons up top to jump around. But here, how do I go back with the cd command?
สำหรับวันนี้ก็คงพอแค่นี้นะครับ การเรียนรู้คอมมานด์ไลน์ทำงานไปฟังเขาสอนใช้คอมมานด์ไลน์ลินุกไป ก็พอได้ความรู้อยู่เป็นเชฟอย่างเดียวมันเลี้ยงครอบครัวไม่ได้ก็ต้องเป็นโปรแกรมเมอร์ด้วยนะสำหรับวันนี้สวัสดีครับ